Thank you so much, Amadeus. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. And I'm excited to be joining everyone today and to talk about the topic that we're going to discuss, which is how team leaders specifically can increase or improve and optimize their own engagement, the engagement of their teams. And just to start off, um, this is the outline of what we'll be covering today. So we'll be looking briefly at employee engagement. This is something that we've talked about previously also in our January webinar. We discussed, we covered the basics, and we looked at what employee engagement or high levels and low levels and manifestations of employee engagement look like at the organizational level. But also today, we're going to look a bit more closely at how leaders specifically influence engagement in their teams. And we're going to look at a few research insights. As Amadeus introduced me, I'm the research and development lead. So I like to look at what the data says, what the research is saying, and how we can apply that to optimize, excuse me, to optimize organizational performance and other organizational outcomes that we desire to have in our organizations. But also we'll look at the practical tips, what now are the tips or the key points or the action points that leaders can take away from this session to maximize, to start working on their own employee engagement and improving it in their teams. And we'll look at 360 assessments and how that can be a psychometric tool that can help with leadership effectiveness. And then we'll look also at our own 360 assessment, which, like Amadeus introduced, is designed specifically for high context cultures. So without further ado, we have a question for you, which should be coming up on your screens briefly about your experience with leaders and leader behavior. Yeah. So just out of curiosity, like I said, today we're looking at how leaders can influence employee engagement, specifically how they can optimize it. But we'll also be looking at how perhaps they have not, some of the behaviors or some of the actions they take can work against that. So we'd just like to know, have you ever been motivated by a team leader's actions? So it's a quick yes or no. And I've seen up until now, all our replies have answered yes. And similarly, have you ever found your team leader's behavior to be demotivating? If there's any instance, perhaps it was something they said, how they handled a few things. To that also, we've gotten, yeah, so this is a bit more nuanced. We have a no as well for the first question, which is, have they ever been motivated by their team leader's actions, which is an interesting reply. And yeah, so this again shows even within our small group that we have here with who are attending the webinar today, it shows just how much a leader's actions go beyond just the direct influence and influence the team. And sometimes even with the smallest actions, with the smallest activities, because the employees are looking up to you and they're looking to you for direction, for motivation, for inspiration, they can find some actions and some behaviors motivating or demotivating, and it can really affect their engagement levels. So if I could just share these results, you should be seeing them on your screen, that 83% of us have replied that, yes, we have been motivated by our team leaders' actions at some point. And 80% of us have found our leaders' behaviors at some point to be demotivating, while 20% have sometimes found our leaders' actions and behaviors to be demotivating. So as we now go onto the rest of the webinar, we'll just kick off with the rest of the webinar. So as I had shared before, in the January webinar, we had looked at employee engagement. And we'll just define it again, which is employee engagement is the situation or is a positive attitude that employees have towards their workplace and towards their job. And this is actually always seen or can be inferenced by how employees act, think, and behave in the workplace. And so what I mean by how they act, it can be activities like how willing they are or how committed they are to going above and beyond the tasks that they routinely do, the tasks that they were assigned to help other people or to advance the mission of the organization, but also emotionally. When employees are emotionally connected, they have an emotional bond, they feel that they find a lot of meaning in the work that they do, then that is also a manifestation of them being engaged with the work that they do. But also mentally, with mentally is when they are very proactive. You can see that they are contributing actively to solving problems, to raising ideas that can help the organization. And this is a situation that is desired by organization, or it's very important because a lot of research has gone into dissecting what causes this attitude or this behavior to show up in employees, but also what are the outcomes of high levels of engagement. And there's been a lot of solid research that has proven that high employee engagement increases the productivity. I think we can see how, given what the manifestation of engagement is with the problem solving, with the proactivity, with the finding meaning and having intrinsic motivation. But also it has reduced turnover. That is, employees with high employee engagement, with high levels of engagement, are less likely to leave organizations for other jobs or for other opportunities. But also they are more eager to come into work. And this is seen with the reduced absenteeism, and they have better well-being because the work is meaningful, because the work, they are happy to be doing it. They understand how they are contributing to their organization. So they feel better about what they do. So this is, as desired as it is, it's also a construct, it's also a behavior that we have to look at how it is reached or how we achieve that. And some of the key drivers that have been seen or have been found to really contribute to high levels of employee engagement is our psychological meaningfulness. So, like what I said, when employees find their work significant and worthwhile, then they're more likely to engage and to be excited to do that work, to find it easier as well to do the tasks that they're required to do. But there's also a mixture of personal, home, and organizational resources that make it easier for employees to reach this high levels of engagement. And an example of personal resources is like a person's ambition. So you find that people with high levels of ambition, it's easy for them to go above and beyond, to be proactive, to um, dedicate themselves and commit themselves fully to advancing the mission of the organization because they really also want to advance their own careers in that level, in that way. But also home resources play a big role. So a good level of home work-life balance is also needed for employees to exhibit high levels of employee engagement, but also a lot of organizational resources. So what the organization gives the employees or how they create the environment for them to work also goes a long way in determining the level or in influencing the level of employee engagement that employees end up showing in their work. And this can be a range of resources. It can range from how their supervisor is supporting them, which is what we're talking about today with the leadership and employee engagement. But it can also be issues like how their job is structured. So whether it's a job that gets a lot of rest, whether they get a lot of recognition from that job, what policies are around their organization, are around leave and other things that are important to the organization, but also things like communication and the culture. These are also very key in how in influencing whether an employee is actually engaged in their work. But also there's the construct or there's the issue of psychological safety, which has been a popular topic among researchers, but also among HR personnel as of late. And this just the term psychological safety refers to a sense of security that people feel when expressing themselves especially to management and to higher ups. And not only not only does it refer to the ability to speak up, but it's the security in knowing that their speaking up, their sharing of ideas or concerns will not be met by repercussions. And so whether they're criticizing, whether they're sharing a challenge, understanding that the ideas will be taken into consideration, but also will be considered constructive, is also very key for people to being engaged. So essentially being able or making the space to be listened to. So that is a short introduction to employee engagement. Now, the role of leaders in employee engagement. So just from the introduction of employee engagement, I hope you have started to see how leaders can influence employee engagement. And so they shape the conditions of psychological safety, just like I said, they make it whether conducive or not conducive for people to be able to come up to them and share concerns, share challenges, perhaps even share their learning, but also some conditions for meaningfulness, leaders also have influence over. So things like whether an employee understands how their role contributes to the organizational goal, that is also very key to them deriving meaningfulness or a sense of meaning from their work. And other key resources, so things like feedback, things like how a job is designed, how flexible a role is also things that are sometimes in a leader's or manager's control. So they shape these conditions and they have a great influence over the engagement levels that are later seen at the team level and at the organizational level. And if we go down to the type of leadership, because there's a lot of leadership theories and types of leaderships that are introduced nowadays. When you go down to the type of the leadership that is associated most with high employee engagement, is this idea or is this type called transformational leadership, which also I think we have heard of. And I also want to quickly touch on the 4 facets or the 4 dimensions of transformational leadership. And just to help us see why this is associated with high levels of employee engagement. So the first facet or dimension of transformational leadership, is the intellectual stimulation. So when leaders are able to encourage innovation, are able to encourage problem solving, encourage the employees to think outside the box, that is help employees go think beyond the traditional way, perhaps doing the traditional way of doing their work. This is also something that contributes significantly to the levels of employee engagement, because then this is actually you stimulating or leaders stimulating their ability to find or to engage their mental states, to engage their thinking, such that they're able to contribute to their own work and to the goals of the organization. But also inspiration, motivation. So leaders being able to communicate a compelling vision that people are working towards. And this goes a long way in helping them find meaning in their work. As a leader, you can imagine a lot of organizations with hierarchies. The further down you go in the hierarchy, the less it's common to see that it's the less inspired the employees are becoming. And it's up to the leader, it's up to the manager, whether of the team, whether of that department, to now ensure that these people understand the significance of that, inspire them so that they understand how they're contributing to the vision, to the bigger picture and the vision of the organization, no matter how small their roles can seem to the team or to the organization. But another facet of transformational leadership is the individualized consideration. And this refers to how a leader is able to connect to a one-on-one, offer personalized support or personalized coaching to employees, such that employees feel seen, they feel appreciated, but also they understand that the leader cares for them and is actually there to help not only the organization grow, but their employees as well as individuals grow. And the last facet is the idealist influence. This is the leader themselves have to show or portray a very positive, strong, ethical vision such that people can look up to them. So they look up to them and think, oh, this is the ideal person. I wouldn't, perhaps they can even think, I wouldn't want anybody else to leading the department or leading the team, because I see how ethical this person is, how deserving they are of the position. So transformational leadership is a type of leadership that is mostly associated with employee engagement. And from how we have looked at the elements, the dimensions, and the influences of employee engagement, I hope you can see why, because it's directly feeding into the key drivers of employee engagement. And most likely, leaders who employ this type of leadership see the results with the high engagement levels of their team and the employees. Now, what can leaders do? Now, as much as it's easy to discuss the ideal leader and what would work best, sometimes it's not easy to work out in practice. So first of all, I put together 3 tips that leaders can look at or can consider when they're managing their teams and wanting to improve the levels of employee engagement. So the strongest correlation with high levels of employee engagement comes from a leader's ability to support their team. So being able to promote team development, whether it's an individual level or the group level, and openly celebrate the success of the team members is something that has been shown to correlate greatly. So it goes hand in hand, just to say, it goes hand in hand with high levels of engagement, but also performing effectively themselves. So when leaders are able to make effective decisions, proactively solve the problems, and portraying that ideal leader that we talked about in the transformational leadership is key to influencing and improving employee engagement, and able again to display integrity. So ethics, honesty, transparency are things that employees really appreciate in a leader, and they're more able or more willing to commit and engage in their work when their leader, when their manager is ethical, when their manager is transparent with their communication and honest with the team. Further to what leaders can now do, like we said, supporting the team, this is the most unique predictor. It's the most unique contributor to high levels of team engagement. And leaders can try to implement these behaviors that such as having genuine interest in the team, fostering pride and loyalty, and promoting superior service. But something that leaders should recognize, I think I've definitely talked to a few leaders who were frustrated because they felt that employees are not as engaged as they are, or are not as committed to the organization as they are. And what leaders should understand or take into account as a manager, as a leader, is the reasons that you might be seeing this in employees. So as a manager, as a person who is in a supervisory position, you're more likely to be engaged in the organization because you're more likely to be in the know, as people say, or to understand clearly how your role is contributing, more clearly how your role is contributing to the organization's success. You're likely to have access to better resources, including compensation, maybe flexibility in the way you work, but also variety, the type of work that you do. If we consider a situation like maybe a manufacturing industry, in a hierarchical organization where they do manufacturing, it's very likely that at the lowest levels, employees are doing the same type of work day in, day out, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But the higher you go on the supervisory chain, those leaders start having a bit of variety, perhaps a bit more training, opportunities for growth and development. So the resources that are afforded to leaders are more friendly, and they facilitate with higher levels of engagement in a way that they're perhaps not the same for people that you supervise or their subordinates. And so instead of they maybe complaint or not understanding why employees are not as likely as leaders to be engaged, leaders have to approach them with empathy, with understanding that they are at the leaders themselves are at advantage point with this. And what they can do is, like we said, so support their team, but also offer individualized guidance at points where it's possible, and help them grow and develop in their roles. So another thing that leaders can do is consider one way that they can support their team effectively is to consider what the task is. So there's people have strengths in different leaders have strength in different competencies or in different areas. So there's some who are good at establishing and also nurturing relationships with people, and in that way, influencing people because they have gone the way towards perhaps being friendly, understanding where they come from, and connecting with them on a personal level. But there are also other leaders who are very technical, if I could use that, technical, and they're competent in the areas that they lead in, such that where they work best is making the decisions, making the strategies, and essentially giving people instructions or guiding people on how to do the work. And one thing that leaders can do in making sure that they are flexible enough to maintain engagement in both situations is to kind of to gauge the situation. So is it a situation that you think, given your employees or given your subordinates level of knowledge or level of expertise, would they benefit more from a relationship oriented approach? So would they benefit more from mentoring, coaching, or would they benefit more from being told what to do? So you have to gauge and see where their strengths are and lean more into those strengths. So that's how leaders can, well, that's a few things that are a few ways that leaders can try to influence employee engagement in their teams and in their organization. Now, just before we go to the next slide, we also have another poll for you. If you could just, Amandias. If you could just answer this quick question for us. So, as I said, in this session, we're also looking to talk about 360 assessments or 360 tools, which are common tools, well, common in some contexts, less common in others. So we'd like to know, have you ever used a 360 assessment? Right. I'll give you a minute to just give us your replies. There should be a poll on your screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for continuing to share your experience. So our results actually indicate that 57% of us have not used 360 assessments, while 43% of us here today have used a 360 assessment. So I trust that this next part will be enlightening then for those of us who haven't used assessments. For those of us who have, I'm excited to introduce to you or to talk more about our own 360 assessment, which is again designed for high context cultures. So now 360 assessments, these are tools that are designed for receiving performance feedback from supervisors, from peers, and from direct reports. So usually people fill in some type of self-assessment. Perhaps it's a performance evaluation at the end of the year. Perhaps it's quarterly, perhaps it's semi-annually. You fill it in yourself and you assess what you've done well, perhaps what could have been done better, and how you can improve on these aspects that you have identified. 360 assessment is a more comprehensive feedback tool that aims to collect this feedback or information from multiple sources. So from supervisors, from peers that you work with, but also from direct reports. And for leaders, this is a very important tool, especially if you're looking to improve engagement of your team, which I think every leader should be looking to do. Because they become a tool that you can use to reflect on what your strengths are and what your development areas are. And as much as we are good at assessing ourselves, or perhaps something we think we are, people who work with us on a day-to-day basis, people who observe us, would have more insight into what we're doing well, what we could improve on, and other things that can really help a leader improve their effectiveness and identify their strengths in trying to influence employee engagement. So 360 assessment tools can be used as an ongoing feedback tool as well. It can be used, you use it once and look at or discover strengths, development areas, what you're doing well, what you should keep doing, what you should consider changing. And if you use it on a regular basis, so perhaps it's every 6 months, every year, you get to understand which ones of your strengths, development areas are changing, how they're changing, but also from looking or having the chance to reflect on this, you see how your behaviors are affecting the rest of the team. And so you get an ongoing feedback loop that you can continuously work on yourself as a leader to improve your own behavior, to improve your own action, and also affect or influence employee engagement. Now, the Zanga 360 assessment is an assessment tool that is designed specifically for high context cultures. And like I said, it promotes self-awareness to leaders. And as a leader, you should be willing to grow. You should be willing to get feedback on your actions and change where it's required, continue doing what you're doing when it's required. And really what our assessment here on the right, I have some excerpt of our report, which shows you some areas of priority that you should be working on as a leader. So whether it's how your business approach, that is how you make decisions, how you work with other people, how you make strategies and plan your work. Or it could be in emotional intelligence. So how you cooperate with others, how you share your own emotions, but also how you relate with other people in the workplace. It could be communication. It could be continuous improvement. So work on your own growth and development. Or again, the last one is also continuous improvement. This is just a sneak peek of a very comprehensive report that comes out of doing the Zanga 360 assessment, which when is deployed, again, a few peers fill it in to give you some insight, some of your direct reports, but also your supervisor and yourself. So the benefit also to you yourself as a leader filling in the 360 assessment is while you see yourself a certain way, which is now going to be used as a basis for comparing what other people are saying, there could be hidden strengths that you haven't found out that people are seeing and appreciating. Perhaps it's behaviors, perhaps it's how you're showing up every day and giving people a greeting. Perhaps it's how you're showing up in times of crisis and taking the load off of other people's backs so that they have manageable workloads that you might be considering as normal or usual, or you might not be noticing. But people who work with you, your peers, your direct reports might be noticing such behaviors and appreciating it. And since we have been discussing how leaders' actions can influence, or how leaders' actions are very key and very significant in affecting employee engagement, this assessment, so this specifically, is very key, is very fit for that purpose because it's a behavior assessment. And so it looks at the different ways that an individual or leader, whoever it is, it doesn't have to be a leader, behaves in the work context. And from that information, now is able to give you a comprehensive report on what are your strengths, what are your development areas, hidden strengths, and also some actionable points on what you can start to work on in order to develop these areas. So that is our 360 assessment. But of course, there is always a little bit of intimidation. There's always a little bit of questioning that comes with implementing 360 assessments. So one, feedback can be scary. People, as much as we would like to grow, even as leaders, we're still humans. And it could be hard to hear ways that we are thinking or maybe interpreting as people saying that we're not effective or we're not able to do something, or perhaps even we're not deserving of the roles. But it's important for this to work, for this to be effective in achieving what it's meant to achieve, which is giving you insight into what you're doing well, what you could develop for the benefit of yourself and your team. It's very key to follow the steps for success, which I've outlined here, which is just some best practice to consider when you're deploying or using 360 assessments. So one, it should be clearly defined what is the purpose of the assessment. And so this is not meant to evaluate a leader. It's not meant to go perhaps into some scheme of how much a person gets paid or how much a person or that person is promoted, but rather to give them insight into what they're doing right, what they could improve on in order to achieve the goals of the team and the organization. So this should be communicated with the people who are going to fill in that assessment for you, whether it's the peers, whether it's the direct reports, so that they understand, and they understand also that being honest and open is the best way to achieve that. Sorry. But also, it's very important that the peers are anonymous or they're not known, so that as a leader, you have a lot of power. And sometimes, because we're humans, people tend to abuse that power. People tend to perhaps have some grudge against people who've filled in the report in a way that they considered negative. But so then being anonymous is a protective layer that we add so that people can still share their feedback, their honest feedback, without worrying that it will come back to them in any negative way. But also the results should be used in a very constructive way. And the emphasis in the results, in interpreting the results, is seeing how you can develop, how you can better support your team, how you can improve your skills and strategic decision making, strategic whether it's leadership, mentorship, coaching, so that the team gets what they need to be engaged in their work. But also, most importantly, it should follow up with actionable plans and support. So when you get the feedback, there are recommendations, and you should explore those actions, because ultimately the tool is not just meant to be a picture, it's meant to be something that informs action and next steps for the leaders. So psychological safety, that is again, which we discussed in the very beginning of the presentation, whereby people are able to say and share their thoughts and feelings without fear of repercussion is very important for this tool to work. And as leaders, we have to cultivate that environment, that culture, that people can openly share feedback with you, can openly share their thoughts and feelings with you, and not be expectations. Of course, when they share these feelings and feedback, it's for the best, for the better of the organization and the team. Right. So this is the end of my presentation, and I just wanted to highlight some key takeaways before we move on to the questions, to your questions, which I'm eager to hear from you guys. So again, to reiterate, leaders significantly influence team engagement or employee engagement. They are in control of the culture, or they're big influences of the culture and other key resources that employees need in order to be engaged. And they should, leaders should be aware of this and also take the necessary steps to improving engagement based on their position and the influence that they have. But also for maximum impact on employee engagement, leaders should prioritize supportive team behaviors, like we discussed. So celebrating the team openly, supporting the team's individual growth and development. These are key behaviors towards achieving high levels of employee engagement. And for better understanding, better awareness of themselves and how they can further improve, utilizing 360 assessments can be a powerful way to understanding what are their strengths, what are the leader's strengths, what are development areas, and how they can further support the team and influence their engagement. So thank you, and over to you, Amadeus.
Thank you very much, Doreen. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking us through this topic and sharing your understanding of it. So this is a point where we get into some of the questions. And some of you have already asked questions and sent in your questions. If you have additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will also be unmuting you shortly, so you can put up your hand and ask a question about this particular topic and what Doreen has presented today. But maybe just to get everything kicked off, we've got a couple of questions that have already been submitted and sent to me. So, for example, how can a leader balance the tasks and relationship-oriented approach to maximize engagement? Because these seem to be quite different, right? So as a leader, I'm trying to encourage engagement in my team. How do I balance this?
Right. That is I think that's a great question, especially for our context. Like like I had shared or I introduced when talking about Zanga in our work, in our assessment, our assessments are designed for high context culture. So it's a culture that there's a lot of implicit communication and there's a lot of value placed on relationships and fostering that relationship. And there's definitely, I can see how definitely in perhaps African culture or the African context, people or leaders can struggle with balancing that relationship aspect with the task aspect. So perhaps if it's somebody that you know or somebody that you respect or somebody that is older than you that you're leading, you might struggle with perhaps delegating or maybe calling them out when they are not performing well. So one thing that I came across that is a very interesting way to gauging or to seeing which behaviors to adapt is to consider the nature of the task itself. So what is it that you're trying to achieve in that specific context, but also to consider the individual's level of expertise on topic. So these two factors can become kind of like the judgment, what we're looking at as how to judge whether you're going to take a more relational approach or a more task-oriented approach. And what I mean by that is if a task is perhaps complex and ambiguous and is something that you think is kind of bearing down on the team or bearing down on the individual that you are leading or supervising, then in this situation, I'm more task oriented. So as you show up as a leader who is there to tell them what to do, to give them that technical expertise or strategic expertise to help them reach the goal, to help them achieve the goal that they're trying to in that instance. But if it's a situation where the individual you're engaging with, the individual you're supervising, or the team are actually a group of experts in the field, and perhaps this problem or whatever situation it is not presenting itself as a challenge, then you can take a step back as a leader and take a more mentorship or supportive role where you are there perhaps to affirm their abilities and ask whether they need any support in that area. And so I think that is a way to kind of gauge whether to take a task-oriented or a relationship-oriented approach with employees and still maintain that motivation and engagement with them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doreen. Is there
Yeah.
anybody who has a question? Please feel free to put it in the chat. We've also just given permission. You can unmute yourself if you have a question for Doreen and ask her directly. So if anybody has a question, Musa, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Musa. Welcome.
Hello.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation, Doreen. I think it was very well put and it was super practical and helpful. And there's so much gems that I've picked up from it that I can already envisage how I'm going to implement it. But then maybe I may have missed this part if you spoke about it, but then I just want you to reiterate it a bit more. So you spoke a bit about creating psychological safety as a leader for you to have optimal engagement and buy-in from your staff and all of those great things that come out from people being comfortable of being themselves, expressing themselves without getting any pushback or being reprimanded in any way. So in a situation whereby you have leaders that can be a bit aggressive in their approach of leadership, and usually aggressive leadership, it's very rare that it comes from a place of goodness. Like, I'm just an aggressive person. I'm trying to give you tough love. Most times it's roped into insecurity, or, power play, or those kind of things. Like there's always has to be a reason why this leader is just like difficult. But sometimes it can be a character thing. Yeah, it's a personality or character flaw. So now in a situation where you have three of these personalities at the very top, they clash. You can see the lack of cohesion at their level, and so everybody else kind of like suffers from that. So I guess my question, I know I've drummed road quite a bit. My question is, if you are coming in to support, the culture of this organization that you've picked up that the leaders themselves are the problems, how can you tactfully get them to a place to become a bit more aware and understand the importance of them creating psychological safety for their staff? Because because they always complain about performance and they are very aggressive when responding to it. But people are just scared and the turnover is pretty high. And I don't have to tell you all these other problems that come out with a scenario like that. So in your expertise, what would you recommend? How do I approach this situation where you have leaders that lack cohesion at their level and they pretty much trample in everybody else?
Thank you, Musa. That is a great question, and I think that is actually that could be the case. It could be the case that is something that happens quite a bit, and I think really something that we have to work on, or something that when you are coming in to solve this as a problem, is work on the leader's self-awareness from the beginning. Because if they do not get to a point where they realize that they are adding or causing the problem, then it's going to be quite hard to move past that. If the interventions or the culture change that you're introducing in order to try and change or improve the performance, decrease the turnover rates, only work on the employees, then that's not going to work. And so I think that a lot of work the work itself needs to start with the leaders themselves. And if it's a situation where, like you said, perhaps it's a power play, or they think that they'll only listen to people who are on their own level, then perhaps that's who you need to lead with. You need to lead with somebody with a lot of experience in leadership, and have them be the person who is talking to them about the importance of self-awareness and growth. I don't know if that makes sense, because sometimes people really care with such people, they really care about who's delivering the message or who is the one talking to them. And so finding people perhaps at the same level with them, perhaps in terms of managerial levels, to be the ones to break the ice and introduce the concept of self-awareness, and use unbiased tools like these psychometric tools to help them understand how they could be contributing to their problems and what the people are seeing from their behaviors, would be a good starting point, would help them realize how they themselves need to change. Because it doesn't, they
Would you
are
call
in
that a
control.
coaching or would you call
Yes,
that a coaching?
definitely. It could be a coaching program. Yes, I would have to take over, would take some time to change, but cultivating that awareness with their role in the dynamic itself would be the very first, I would say would be the first step to rectifying this situation. And psychometric tools, because they're objective, they're not biased, could be the very first step for them to realize, okay, there could be a problem here. Sometimes it is hard for people to own up to that, but again, so using a psychometric tools, using people who are experienced and who are likely to be listened to with such leaders could be the combination that you need in that situation. That's my advice. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much. That makes so much sense.
Thank you.
And how would you look at the internal communication of this process? Because we still want everybody else to. How do we use that process to build some sort of calm? I'm currently dealing with this, and I feel like I've gotten to the So I'm
you
getting
feel like
some
you've gotten
liquids
to
from
the
you.
right place. Yeah. I mean, Amadeus, are you going to say
I'm
something?
sorry, as a moderator, I'm just stepping in because I'm
Yeah,
looking
go
at time and we still have a few other
Okay.
questions. I really respect what you're doing, and please forgive me, but I invite you to contact us. I'll be putting my email into the chat, and I can put you in touch with Doreen, and we can then find a way of helping and supporting you in this, because I feel like this deserves a little bit of a deeper answer than we could provide in the few minutes we have left before this webinar is over. So I'll be dropping that into the chat just now, and anybody who has a question, feel free to give us a shout and give me a shout about this. A request. There are some more questions, and we will handle one or two more before we go off this webinar. But we have a request to you. Please give us some feedback about this webinar. There is a QR code up on the screen that you can scan on your mobile device. And, there's like a very short form. It literally takes like 2 minutes to fill out. Let us know what you think about this and, how we can improve, right? We always learn from each other and we grow better through your feedback. I've also put a direct link to this feedback form in our chat. Click on it. It literally takes 1 or 2 minutes to complete, and you would really be helping us out and make these sessions better for you and for other people's like you. Here's the thing, a very good question similar to Musa's that came up from Debson, who asked, what is the best way of approaching a leader whose behavior is somehow or somewhat demotivating? And I feel that you answered that already,
Yeah.
as you answered Musa.
Yeah.
You know, find a champion. In executive communication, which is my specialty, we often find that the issue isn't that people aren't understanding what you're saying. It's not a comprehension issue. It's an
Yeah.
issue of being able to process what you are
Mm.
saying because of the source, you know, how it's been said, when it's been
Yeah.
said. There's a couple of factors that come into place. But definitely having an ally, especially an ally who can present this more neutrally, in a way that the other person can better process and accept, that is definitely a real power tip. And that's something I'm taking away from this. If anybody else has a question, we have some questions that were submitted. I'd like to tackle one of those. And if anybody else has a question, please put up your hand or put it in the chat. So what are some, this is interesting for me as well. What are some of the quickest strategies that leaders can implement to increase engagement? I think this is something we all want to know, right? So there are all these issues, all these concerns around engagement in teams. What can I actually do to get people to actually increase their engagement, to give me more information, to participate and own the process?
Yeah. So we're looking for a quick fix. Is that it?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, this might be some more medium or long-term
Yeah.
strategies. You tell us.
But yeah, so something that I think that leaders can start doing, whoever's joined us today, perhaps this is something you can take away with you, is start to openly recognize or openly share and celebrate your team's efforts or your team's achievements. So it could be an individual member's achievements, it could be the whole team's achievements. And doing this helps team members understand that they're really contributing to something that's bigger and feel proud and own the work that they do. So having this perhaps a culture of perhaps in every, I know weekly meetings are a thing, but sometimes it's even daily meetings. Um, but recognizing and celebrating your employees openly is something that can really motivate your team members for that time being. But also something else that we can look into and just do more of is the one-on-one check-ins, because as much as we have talked about leaders supporting the team members and championing them and supporting and providing resources, it's really hard to understand what resources they need or how they're doing without having the opportunities to talk to some people on an individual level. So having some one-on-one check-ins, often as you can, is a great way to really understand these needs and to be able to improve the engagement of your team. So yeah, these are my quick recommendations
Thank you,
from, in
Doreen.
addition to everything else. That's fair. Yeah.
Fantastic. There is one more pressing question, and I really want to get this in. And by the way, the link to the
Yeah.
feedback form is in the chat. Please feel free to give us feedback. This helps us make these sessions better, and we'll be very grateful for your contribution and your opinion. Mr. John Sakala asks, would the
Yeah.
360 assessment be applicable in the public sector, where leaders have many subordinates in many cases? They have a lot of people to manage, and maybe due to just the scale of it, some leaders become a little bit more autocratic or a little bit more focused on giving commands and instructions, right? Instead of being transformational. How can a 360 help in such an environment when we're talking like scale?
Yeah, I see the challenge with that. I see the challenge with the big numbers. But I would actually argue that with the big numbers is where you can get more objective feedback, because you have the opportunity to randomly select people who give the leader feedback or they provide the insight on the 360 assessment. And so because it's randomly selected, you're more likely to get more objective information or objective feedback that can really feed into that leader's awareness. And with regards to numbers and the type of leadership style that people take or people adopt in times when there's big numbers of employees, I see the challenge there. And the challenge there also comes with things like one-on-one check-ins. If a person leading a department with 100 people, that's impossible to schedule one-on-one check-ins with each person. And that's when I would say the other tools or the other methods to improve engagement come in, such as the growth and development. So having ample opportunities for people to train, to increase their own skills, to educate themselves, to grow beyond what they're currently doing. So it's in having these initiatives that still show the team that you care for them and you support them, that you can really influence the engagement, despite the huge numbers that you're having to lead. But also, yes, I would still recommend a 360 in this situation because you're very likely to get some objective feedback from the group of people that you're leading. So I would say it's still very much applicable and useful in that context as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I know
Thank
we
you.
are slightly over time and
We are.
really appreciate everybody. We appreciate you, Doreen, and everybody on this call. So, couple of things as we wrap this up, and thank you to everybody who's given us feedback. Please, if you haven't done so already, feel free to do so. We'd be really grateful for it. All feedback is very welcome. So there are two things here. If you are looking at deploying a 360 solution to create that engagement in your team, talk to us. You can get in touch with us via our website, our LinkedIn, or my contact details that I've put in the chat. We'd love to help you. We'd love to have a conversation with you, how we could potentially support a 360 feedback for engagement in your organization. Also, if you'd like to become a Zanga certified facilitator, so you can administer these 360 reports directly, get in touch. All the same contacts channels are open for that as well. And last but not least, if you are struggling and having a challenge with communicating, having hard conversations with the leader in the organization, you might want to reach out to one of our Zanga coaches or mentors. We have a network of experienced certified coaches at every level of management who are maybe able to coach and mentor you through some of these difficult conversations, or to build the skills to have those conversations. And I feel that unlocks so much power for your own career growth, your own personal development. If you're in the HR space or not, it doesn't matter. You are a leader. You might be an HR leader, you might be a finance leader, you might be in marketing or sales like myself, but we're all leaders. We're all called to lead somewhere. So that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much to everybody who has participated. It's a pleasure. All our details are on the screen. If you want to drop us an email, check us out. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn. We have these webinars on monthly. We have these webinars monthly, and they happen on the last Thursday of every month. We're trying out something new with the later time slot to accommodate more people, especially our colleagues from West and East Africa. So let us know if this works for you as well, if this is a better time. We want to thank you very much. Have a blessed evening, and we already wish you an amazing weekend ahead. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.